time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you
to get up out of your chairs.
I want you to get up right now. Go to the window. Open it. And stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you?
Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Wow, what a day. What a day. Evidently, the Russian lawyer, surprise, was it actually a Russian agent? Help me here. Wasn't that how it was originally reported? From the very beginning, wasn't that what we were told, that she was a Russian agent? And now we find out she was a Russian agent. I mean, this again is another one of these moments where our media is just, you reported it accurately to begin with. And then because Trump shamed you, because the Republicans put up a stink, you then, well, you know, she's just a lawyer. And now, surprise, she was a Russian agent. What I am surprised at, though, is that she went in front of the committee and said, yeah, I'm a Russian agent. Yes, I've been working closely with the Russians since 2013. And I'll be honest, I got to think it was probably even well before that. Now, the reporting coming out is the administration showed poor judgment. So now you're going to see the defense, and we said this a while ago, that the defense inevitably is going to be, yeah, we did have all of these relationships and all these ties, and we did all of this questionable stuff, and we did all of it. We did, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, but we were naive. We exercised poor judgment. This is one of those moments where, you know, I remember going back to being a kid and my mother telling me, ignorance is no excuse. It used to be in this country, and maybe it still is, and I just don't know it, that ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance of the law, no excuse. You broke the law. Or at least a moral version of it. You do not collude with the enemy. Now, this is one of those things where, okay, let's for a second step back and say they didn't know. Let's say they didn't know. Let's say they're complete buffoons, complete ignoramuses, dumb as a box of rocks, just the most naive, politically unsavvy people who have ever existed. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, because look, in the last year and a half, they've shown that they really have no clue what they're doing. Let's give them the benefit of that doubt. Let's say that they are that naive, that ignorant, that stupid. Should they be anywhere near classified information, even now? The fact that Jared Kushner still is not out on his ear should be telling us an awful lot. The fact that there are still people in this administration who haven't gotten their security clearances, given the level of incompetence, if you believe they didn't know. Now, I'm going purely on the premise that they didn't know. So don't say, but Rick, we know they know. No, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt right now. The benefit of the doubt is that they truly We're just the dumbest, most naive Forrest Gump kind of people on the planet. Because Mama said, I think even Mama knows better than to side with the Russians. Just kind of throwing that out there. But let's give them the benefit of that doubt. They really clueless, didn't know, Gomer Pyle, Goober, the whole 9 yards. Should they be anywhere near classified information? Should we be putting them anywhere near the levers of power, of decision-making, given their level of incompetence? And again, this highlights the fact that not just any goober can do this. Not just any person should be doing this job. You should at least have some bit of understanding and surround yourself. Because remember, Donald Trump was going to surround himself with what? The best people. The best people ever. We're going to have the best people. Well, evidently the best people thought it was a good idea to collude with a Russian agent. And I know, but hold on, Rick, you're on the premise that they didn't know. Which is where I go, I don't buy it. I've said all along that the underlings, the Kushner, the Junior, the other one that I can never remember his name and probably shouldn't bother to, and Manafort and the rest of them that were in that room, because it just seems, it's like the clown car. It really is. Have you ever seen the clown car where 20 clowns come piling out of the car? And you go, how'd they do that? This meeting seems to be kind of like that clown car, because originally it was just 3 people. And then it was 4 or 5. And before you know it, where were the midgets and monkeys? I mean, seriously. I mean, this is kind of what they're trying to turn this into. But the reality is, I believe they know. I believe they knew top to bottom. I believe they've been in bed with the Russians for a generation now, since the fall of the wall. Our oligarchy and theirs have been tied at the hip, because it isn't about borders. It isn't about flags. It isn't about countries. It's not about none of that. It's about money. It's about power. And now they're being caught where they never have been before. And now they're being exposed for doing the things that they've always done and gotten away with, because now they're on a level where people are now starting to pay attention. And for me, I got to be honest, the Republican Party is corrupt at this point for defending this. Where are the patriots? Where are those people who for years were telling me, I got the Constitution right here in my pocket? Where are they now? Maybe VH1 should do a special. Where are they now? Along with the T-Twits and all the rest of them. Because this is serious. And I know they're trying to poo-poo it away. No, there's nothing to see. Move along. Got Giuliani back. I mean, if that's not part of the clown car, I don't know what is. Maybe we could put him back in the dress. This is serious. And the fact that you have all of this distraction, the fact that this administration is now, it's amazing how many bites at the apple you get when you're this administration. And I saw one of those things, one of those little memes on social media, and it had a picture of George Washington saying, "I cannot tell a lie," and had a picture of Donald Trump saying, "I cannot tell the truth," and had a picture of a bunch of Trump supporters going, "I can't tell the difference." And I'll be honest, that's sad. Because this administration has, all politicians lie. All politicians omit the truth. All politicians frame things in a way that make them look best, pursue their alternative truth, if you will, their alternative realities, their alternative facts. But the rest of us generally hold them accountable. This administration, it doesn't seem to matter, because you've got the entire Republican machine, the entire apparatus defending this president who is, in this instance, is indefensible. Honestly and truthfully, if Barack Obama had these kind of ties, I would be saying the exact same thing. We cannot be colluding with foreign powers, with foreign entities, with foreign enemies. And yes, the Russians still are our enemies. You look at Putin, I shouldn't say the Russians, I should say the Russian government, the Russian leadership under Vladimir Putin. He, enemy. They want to get the old band back together. They want to bring the USSR back together. They want to be the dominant power they once were. And they're causing trouble all over the globe with elections. And you look at what's coming in Syria, what's going on in Iran. This administration, the last people I want in power at this moment. Their level of incompetence is scary. And look, I'm not saying that I can do it better. I shouldn't be president either. I want somebody smarter than me. I want somebody who has the ability to at least think beyond the tip of their nose. And I don't even know that Trump can do that. Or at least can't think beyond the front of his flat screen TV. So when I saw this today, I got to be honest, my mind kind of exploded because we do this often. There's a whole bunch of stuff we already knew that our media then throws out and says, hey, look what we found. And you go, but a year ago, that was the story a year ago. What happened since? And I think it's the fact that we kind of, as a country, maybe it's something in the water, maybe it's the pollution in the air. I don't know. Maybe it's, the carcinogens and all the things that China is sending us. But somehow we have this amnesia where we don't seem to remember much of what came before. And that's one of those scary things that just kind of makes me go, wow, just amazing. Anyway, we got a lot to get to today, a lot I want to talk about. First up, yesterday, the Diamonds and Silk testimony, which I got to be honest, I did watch some of it, not all of it, some of it, quite entertaining. And I got to be honest, a waste of my time. Still entertaining, but a waste of my time and a waste of congressional tax dollars. We should all be furious at promoting these two on a congressional stage, even though they did test a lie. And I hope that they go to jail. I hope they're like any other citizen. You commit perjury, you lie in front of a congressional hearing, they lock you up. Because I know if you were to lie or if I were to lie, they'd be giving us a nice shiny pair of bracelets. Just my thought. We're going to talk about that. Lots to get to. The Russia stuff. Lots to get that. The teachers in Arizona walking in the street. What an amazing display that was yesterday. I'm going to get to the Goldwater Institute's response. And I got to be honest, didn't even know there was a Goldwater Institute. Just shows you how many right-wing think tanks and right-wing troublemakers are out there who have money and lots of time on their hands to stir up nonsense. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Joshua Holland's going to be here to share some of his thoughts on diamonds and silk. Yeah, something like that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
90% of the wealth, 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show. It's time for the Rick Smith Show. The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
The year was 1978. That was the day a West Virginia cooling tower under construction collapsed. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. 151 Check out our workers website. To their deaths. It was considered the worst non-mining disaster in West Virginia history. It's also the worst accident in the history of the country's construction industry. Cooling towers were under construction at the Pleasance Power Plant at Willow Island. Union building tradesmen built up the walls of the tower from scaffolding bolted to it. As each section was poured, the forms would be removed and the scaffolding raised and bolted to the new section. The tower had reached about 168 feet when the previous day's concrete walls began to peel away from the tower. The scaffolding plummeted, as did the workers. Many could only be identified by the contents of their wallet. The Steele family was beyond devastated with the loss of 10 family members. In a 2008 quote, a mix of safety lapses combined to bring the tower crashing down. Concrete in the previous day's lift hadn't hardened enough to hold the scaffolding. Key bolts meant to attach the scaffolding to the tower were missing. An elaborate concrete hoisting system was modified without proper engineering review. Contractors were rushing to speed construction. Dr. Celeste Monforton of the Milken Institute School of Public Health noted that the case highlights still relevant issues: inadequate OSHA penalties, no criminal sanctions, holding workers responsible for contractors' mistakes, ignoring of previous warning signs, and a disconnect between abstract calculations and real-world applications. Kent Ward Jr. noted in his retrospective that in 2008, there was still no state public employee OSHA program in West Virginia. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. SmithShow.com. So yesterday, big hearing in front of Congress. Diamonds and rust. I mean, diamonds and silk, or whatever it is. The duo of the dynamic duo of the Trump supporters in front of Congress, testifying, as if you will. And it used to be Congress is one of those places you just don't do it. Plead the fifth if you have to, but you don't lie. I guess we are in a brave new world where it doesn't really matter. Here to share some of his thoughts on the testifying and also the victimhood. I loved the victim card. I've asked Josh Holland to come talk with us. He's a contributor over at The Nation and also hosts Politics and Reality Radio. Josh, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I appreciate that.
So what did you think of the performance? Because that's really what it was yesterday. I mean, the right wing does a masterful job of putting these little icons or these little media people out in front to be promoted. And that's really what that was yesterday, a great promotion for them.
I think Congressman Ted Lieu, the Democrat, said it best. He opened his remarks by saying, "This hearing is stupid and ridiculous." I always appreciate Ted Lieu for his straightforward way of describing things, and that is accurate. This was yet another House hearing on a silly right-wing conspiracy theory, a already debunked right-wing conspiracy theory that they're being discriminated on social media. And you've had a lot of conservatives move away from Twitter to a site called Gab, which is, you can basically make any kind of racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic comments you want and threaten people, and they won't kick you off the platform. It was remarkable because, I mean, the news that they made, to the degree that they made news, was that they repeatedly lied to Congress about having never received any funding from the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. Their problem is, of course, FEC filings, which show that they were paid $1,300 for field work or research or something like that. And, the reality is that they could be punished for that, theoretically. It's a federal offense. You can actually get up to 5 years in prison, again, theoretically. And this would be the best thing for their career. I mean, they would have their tickets punched on the conservative media circuit, the conservative speakers circuit, and they're already kind of weirdly high profile, would just be that much higher.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. I remember them back, during the election season, and I remember them being trotted out as, these two black women who, daughters of ministers, and got that preacher's rant going on why they support Trump. And what's interesting to me is, you given that background, they bring that kind of Carnival Barker revival tent kind of preaching. And the other part of it to me, at least back then, was, this is an interesting angle to make a boatload of money because, hey, there's not a lot of competition in the direction that they're heading, and they've done very well for themselves financially.
Well, I mean, you have to be a little cautious pointing this out, but the reality is, there are obviously African American conservatives out there.
Sure.
But the reality is that there's also an incentive system where the conservative movement has done this for a very long time, taken black voices and made them the face of this kind of whole network of front groups run by Republicans, run by white Republicans, that advocate for kind of pro-business. You know, they'll oppose the minimum wage, and they get these African-American spokesmen to get out there and be the face of these movements, and in doing so, they can advocate policies that would raise eyebrows if white Republicans were doing so, for their discriminatory impact, and get away with it. This is not new. You know, it's funny, Rick. The very first piece that I ever wrote for money back in 2015 years ago, I was watching C-SPAN, and C-SPAN had billed that they were going to have this spokesman for Project 21. It was a group of black conservatives. And what happened was, as this segment opened, and they've been kind of promoting this segment for a while, they were going to get this Project 21 spokesman. He was going to rebut the NAACP. And a funny thing happened. The segment begins, and there is this white guy, David Almasi. He's a Republican operative. And the C-SPAN host looks at him, and he goes, "You're white." And the guy goes, "Well, the person who was supposed to be here had a flat tire." So they'd booked this black conservative who had a flat tire, and it kind of exposed this whole network of these black conservative groups that had, you know, boards of directors. One of them had Sean Hannity on its board of directors. They were all run by white people and fronted by African Americans. So this is not a new grift.
No, it's not. But, you know, these women have taken it to another level. And I mean, I've watched some of their videos, and, you know, they're mildly entertaining, and there's not much there information-wise, but entertaining. I mean, you know, I've watched it. You know, but for me, I keep coming back to you can't go in front of Congress and lie. And I'm okay with them being martyrs. I'm okay with them punching their tickets and all that stuff. We just need to hold them accountable. And the other part of this, and this is, maybe you found this as well, I mean, the victimhood level of is just amazing to me. Them saying that, you know, Facebook is targeting them directly. Social media is targeting them directly. And I'll be honest with you, Facebook targeted everybody. Every group that I know is complaining, hey, we can't get our message out on Facebook anymore. In fact, we've stopped using it entirely because, you know, for the most part, doing what we do, it isn't helpful.
Yeah, the Nation's content, stuff that I write at the Nation, has the same problems. I mean, the victimhood complex is really the right way to describe it. And this is very well developed on the conservative side of the spectrum. As they believe that all of the institutions in this country are set against them, and that they are constantly facing oppression. And, you know, it is hard for us to imagine that, given that they are not only, you know, in control of Congress and the White House and have majorities on the Supreme Court and have control of a majority of state legislatures, but it's also this kind of larger thing where you have these polls showing that, I don't want to quote the exact number, but very large numbers of Trump supporters specifically will tell pollsters that the people who are facing the worst discrimination in this country are white people or white Christians. This is also true of evangelicals. They genuinely see themselves as a persecuted minority. And there's no tangible evidence of this. It's like they'll cite things on TV award shows. You know, oh my God, somebody accepting an Oscar said something mean about Donald Trump. Therefore, I am part of an oppressed minority. It's a kind of mindset that permeates so much of conservative writing and conservative messaging. And, you know, we could talk about Kevin Williamson in that same vein.
Oh, absolutely. But here, the thing is, this is what 30 plus years of right wing talk radio has done. I mean, if you listen to the Limbaughs and you listen to them, they're always the oppressed. They're always fighting. They're the underdog. They've taken that American, love of the fighting underdog, and they've internalized it as everyone's against them. I mean, it's amazing to me, because if you turn on talk radio anywhere in this country, you're going to hear right-wing blather, but somehow, with them being the majority, somehow they're still the minority and being it's really twisted, but the people who consume that stuff, they've internalized it.
They really have. And I don't know to what degree there was a kind of conscious effort at some point to say, look at how successful the civil rights movement was in the 60s by, saying we are fighting oppression.
But they were really oppressed, Joshua.
I know that. No, I know that. Believe me. My point is that I think that conservatives look very carefully at, long-term strategic goals. They think long. They play the long game. And I don't know to what degree, there was conversation among conservative leaders back in the 70s that said, you know what, this is an effective political message, and we should adopt it. I'm not suggesting that there was a meeting of people, but it's just interesting to me that in American politics, people do tend to side with the underdog.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do too. When I take the kids to any sporting event, if it's not a team that I particularly care for one way or another, I always root for the underdog. It's just
me too.
Just how it is, and that's I think a very American thing to do. But you said a second ago you don't know that there was a meeting back in the 70s. We know there were memos written. We know there were numerous ones. The most famous one being the Powell memo, and we know that they started things like the Heritage Foundation in '73, the American Legislative Exchange Council the same year. All of these think tanks, the state policy networks, all of this infrastructure that they built to do just what we're talking about.
That's absolutely right, and that stems from the perception that I was talking about, that all the institutions that deal in knowledge and ideas, that is the academy, the media, are all dead set against them. And they said, okay, look, we've got deep pockets, and we're going to create an alternative information infrastructure, and it's been remarkably effective.
I mean, it's just amazing to me. And even people that I've known for years, that when you start talking to them, they play that victim card, and because especially when you start talking about affirmative action, and I'll be honest, I've never lost a job because of affirmative action, but I know a lot of people who think they have.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing, because I go, well, tell me when that was, and I know it. How do you know?
Yeah. Absolutely right, and the the desire to say, look, I am the victim of this, kid getting into college that there was it's all deeply embedded in this victimhood complex. It's interesting. There was a piece just today from NPR about how conservatives feel themselves to be an oppressed minority in this country. Trump supporters specifically. It's a potent narrative, and it's one that Trump has capitalized on throughout the campaign from the very beginning. You are being screwed over by stupid politicians who would prefer an undocumented immigrant to have your job, and it's very unfair. You're getting screwed over by China. Mexico is sending rapists, and he was very adroit at understanding this psychological phenomenon and really playing on it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And that victim card, time and time again. But hey, Donald Trump was going to fix it all. And there's going to be all this winning because who doesn't like winning? In fact, I remember him saying there'll be so much winning, you'll get sick of winning.
Yeah, that's right. And there's an irony here, which is that these same people are the first ones to tell truly marginalized communities, people who face real discrimination, to suck it up and that it's your fault. So these are the people who say there is no such thing as institutional racism. So, disparate outcomes for African Americans are because they're lazy. It's all on them. So they say, take personal responsibility. Take personal responsibility. You have to do it. And then you say, maybe you criticize them, and they do not take any personal responsibility whatsoever. It's always somebody else's fault for, any conservative misdeed is somebody else's fault. It was interesting. There's a candidate, Tenney, I forget her first name, here in New York State, Republican, very right-wing in a kind of moderate district, New York 22. She blamed the deep state for Ben Carson's $31,000 office furniture.
Oh, really? And how did the deep state need extra seats at the table? Is that what the argument was? Did the deep state make him want to raise the cost of rents 3 times on poor people? Did they do that too?
Yeah, it's the deep state. She blamed mass shootings on Democrats.
Okay.
It is again this personal responsibility for thee, but not for me. Very consistent. Very consistent. Actually, Kevin Williamson, who has written 5 columns or 7 columns or whatever in the mainstream media about how the mainstream media discriminates against him, he wrote this whole screed about how white working class people in Rust Belt communities have been slammed by global economic trends, have nobody to blame but themselves. He said, suck it up. These communities deserve to die. That's what he said. He wrote that. And then when he gets criticized for his own choices, his own rhetorical choices, right? Nobody forced him to say that he believed that women who get an abortion should be hanged. That's his choice, right? And so he assails these white working class people for not getting off their butts and moving to a more dynamic community. It's their fault. They're stagnant. And then he takes no responsibility whatsoever. It's somebody else's fault that he is not a good fit for a publication like The Atlantic.
Yeah.
By the way, let me plug. I have a piece at The Nation called Kevin Williamson is No Victim.
And I was just actually looking at that. I was going to put it out on Twitter and make sure people take a look at it because, you get this kind of finger pointing as you're pointing out. It's everybody else's fault. But when the 3 fingers that are pointing back at you, we don't mind. We don't ever talk about that. And I look at folks like this who are doing the preaching, who are doing the finger pointing, and you go, what's in your closet?
Yeah, I mean, look at the free speech martyrs. I mean, what they're basically saying is that their right to express themselves is being trampled by people criticizing them. I mean, there have been some scattered incidents where campus protests have gotten out of hand. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
That's a separate issue.
That happens.
But the vast majority of times what they're talking about is people protesting them, and protesting is an expression of their own First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I have no idea why anyone would go listen to Milo speak. To be honest, in fact, there was a moment where I was going to interview him at the RNC convention, and as soon as he found out that I was not someone who was going to, proverbially kiss his behind, he got up and he walked away. I said, you and I are not going to agree, just so you know. And he bolted. And that was one of those really bizarre kind of moments where I go, this is a guy who I thought he made his bones on confrontation. Yeah,
I mean, Milo, I wonder if he would have done that if he thought that he could make a incident out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like
that's it. He knew he would be swinging down.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That is an excellent point because, he showed up at a bar recently where the Democratic Socialists were having a meeting and just happens to walk into a bar where the Democratic Socialists are having a meeting. So he could just do just that.
Yeah, I mean, so full disclosure, one of the people involved in that was an editor at The Nation, Annie Shields. She was not there in her work capacity, I should point out. She is a member of DSA. It was off hours. But he says that he randomly walked into that bar. And here's the thing about that. There is only one bar in that neighborhood where they were likely to go for a drink after the meeting.
Okay, so you're going to defend him. All right, good.
No, I'm not defending him at all. I'm saying that he probably walked in there. He says that he randomly walked in there, and I believe he went there looking for a confrontation to get attention for himself.
See, that's where I'm at, but you said there was only one bar, so I was assuming there was a defense there.
No. He says, I just randomly chose that bar. I didn't know where they would be going for a drink afterwards. How could I know that?
Right.
But there's only one place where they could have really had a drink, and he could know exactly what he was going to walk into, and poor Milo hasn't had any attention lately, right? Nobody's hated him for a while. Nobody cares about him anymore, and he wanted to relive that rush of making trouble and being hated. The other thing about that story, by the way, is that, people have a tendency to blow these things up and make a big controversy over them. Obnoxious people get kicked out of bars every day.
Sure.
Who cares?
Sure. I mean, when I was 18, 19, I got kicked out of bars occasionally. No, I
believe you. I totally believe you. Yeah,
no, I mean, it was the time. You were 18. You were.
Honestly, I've been thrown out of a bar once or twice myself.
Generally it was always a scuffle over a girl. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into one of those. Somebody's boyfriend come over, and you get into this back and forth, and then both of you get thrown out in the streets, which I always thought was a dumb idea because then you're out in the street together.
I think I've only been thrown out of a bar for having one or too many and maybe getting a little loud. But, yeah, I mean, look, it happens. It happens all the time. It happens every day in America. Obnoxious people are thrown out of bars. And Milo, and his defenders, and I should point out some of these kind of liberals who always glom onto these stories, they made this big controversy over it. And it's like, get a grip.
I didn't care. I mean, I looked at it and I go, it's kind of stupid. I go, and maybe that's what we need. We need a bunch of people, go to the bar, have a couple of drinks, disagree, argue, fight it out, do what you got to do. And on the other side, maybe we come out closer together. Just kind of a thought.
The other thing is that there was a certain amount of liberal hand-wringing. And the argument was, this is not strategically intelligent, right? You're making a martyr out of a guy who wants to be a martyr. You're giving Milo what he wants. And the problem that I have with that argument is that this was not a planned protest. Nobody sat down and said, oh, is this a good idea? Well, let's think about the strategic
No, this was a reaction.
And they were having drinks, right? You have a bunch of kind of lubricated lefties, and here comes one of the most obnoxious people on the far right, on the white nationalist far right. And, they reacted spontaneously. You can't expect people to think strategically at all times when they're having a drink with their friends at the bar.
Yep, I'm with you. Good point.
Yep.
Good point. Last question I've got for you. In looking at all of this, it's not going to go away. I mean, this victimhood stuff is not going to go away. How do you? I guess the question I have for you is, how do we get people to recognize that one, they're not the victim, and two, it's just bad shtick.
I don't think that there's a good chance of us getting them to recognize it. When I think that the kind of more realistic thing is to get mainstream journalists to understand that this is a grift. That this genuine instance of people being oppressed. This is a con. This is people who complain about Facebook changing their algorithms, but don't say, oh, Facebook changes algorithms. They say, oh, we're being, discriminated against because we're conservative. There was that story of the guy who got thrown out of a bar for wearing a MAGA hat in New York, and he sued the bar and claimed that his hat was a religious expression because there is no law against discriminating against people based on their political beliefs, but there are laws against discriminating against people for their religious beliefs. And he just said, my MAGA cap is religious. And of course he was laughed out of court, but the fact that a lawyer took that case, the fact that he thought to sue on grounds of religious discrimination is actually very telling about this mindset.
No, that's a whole nother argument for a whole nother day. I mean, the right wing has set up entire legal defense funds for every right-wing idiocy that you can imagine. You look at the National Right to Work Legal Defense. Any problem you've got against a union, they will sue at the drop of a hat. Anything with that they can even remotely call religious freedom, there are groups who are willing to sue it. They've figured out that the judiciary is where they screwed this country over.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and that is a much bigger topic, and you're absolutely right on all accounts.
Good stuff. Joshua, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work over there at The Nation.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Joshua Holland. Again, check out his stuff over there at The Nation. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check that out. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Good stuff. Joshua, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work over there at The Nation.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Joshua Holland. Again, check out his stuff over there at The Nation. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can check that out. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you. But I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1825. That was the day that saw what is widely considered the first strike for the 10-hour workday. It happened in Boston, Massachusetts. Journeyman carpenters had grown tired of being required to work from sunup to sundown. They decided it was time to make a stand. But the master carpenters who controlled the craft did not side with the journeymen. The master carpenters claimed that the day-long toil had, quote, been customary from time immemorial. With this resistance from the top, the first 10-hour workday strike went down in defeat. But the idea had been born, and soon it began to grow. Boston carpenters struck again in 1832 and again 3 years later. These strikes were also unsuccessful. But during the last strike, the workers wrote a flyer that read, quote, "We have been too long subjected to the odious, cruel, unjust, and tyrannical system which compels the operative mechanic to exhaust his physical and mental powers. We have rights and duties to perform as American citizens and members of society, which forbid us to dispose of more than 10 hours for a day's work." These words echoed to Philadelphia, where workers took up the banner for the 10-hour workday. The strike spread across the city of brotherly love, from printers to carpenters, from bakers to public employees. 10 hours became the law in Philadelphia, then throughout Pennsylvania. From there, the call for 10 hours spread across the country. Later, the movement grew into a demand for the 8-hour workday. The ability of workers to have time away from the job to live a full life of dignity is one of the core causes of the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, in my email box this morning, I came across a guest request from the Goldwater Institute. Evidently, the Barry Goldwater people have decided that they want to have they want their institute. And I'm like, okay, fine. I found out that they have a vice president of litigation, which kind of plays right into what we were talking about with Josh Holland just a minute ago, that, they've set up the right wing has set up all of this infrastructure on suing whenever something happens that they don't like. They really have. They've set up, they know they've taken over the judiciary. They know that Trump is packing the courts as fast as he can, because during the Obama years, again, as Josh was saying, these people think long term. They're playing the long game. So as McConnell and the Republicans held up, numerous federal court positions, also stole the Supreme Court seat. As they were doing that, they knew down the road, eventually, we leave enough of these openings, we can pack the court, which is what they did with Clinton as well. This isn't new. This isn't a new game. They've been playing this for a long time. It's the Democrats don't play it as well. What we end up with is a very conservative judiciary. So I get the Goldwater Institute sending me a guest request on the illegal teacher strike in Arizona. And their argument is that by going out on strike, these teachers are depriving 800,000 Arizona students of an education. It's illegal. And the thing is these kids are entitled to an education. And the thing is I actually agree with them to an education. I know all of these 800,000 kids are entitled to an education. I know here in Pennsylvania, where I'm at, the Constitution actually states that all children are entitled to a thorough and efficient public education. Very clear wording, very, very simple, so simple that even a right-winger can understand it. No commas to make it difficult, none of that stuff. Very thorough, efficient public education. Simple. And, I look at this statement by the Goldwater people and go, okay, I'm with you. I absolutely agree. The children should be entitled to the best education possible. Where were you the day before yesterday? Where were you 6 months ago? Where were you a year ago? Where were you 2, 5? Where were you back then? When all of the right-wing attacks, all of these Republican governors were slashing budgets and forcing school districts to eliminate sports programs and extracurriculars and music and art and all the other things that they've done, and while simultaneously imposing on them a testing regime that is extraordinarily expensive, not to mention worthless. Where were you then? Only now, when the teachers have finally said, we've had enough, do you start using words like flagrant violation of the law, illegal teachers strike. Where were you when you could have stopped years of children from getting less than they could get from their education? Where were you then, Goldwater? The guy who's the director of education policy. And again, where the hell was this education policy guy when all of these budgets were being stripped? Where? Crickets. Anyway, he says, as a former teacher, I know the negative impact even one day of missed instruction can have on a student, let alone several days. He explains students deserve to have their education uninterrupted by politics. The impact of these missed days and potential extended school year can impact achievement on advanced placement exams, delayed graduation, negative consequences for students with special needs, because we care about the special needs kids, and previously planned activities based on the school year calendar. Yeah, mom and dad's vacation really matters when you have teachers who can't afford to put food on their own table, let alone fill the backpacks of little Johnny and Susie, who can't afford to eat lunch at school and whose parents can't afford to put food on their table. Yeah, I'm sure they're really concerned about their vacation. And I look at that statement, and that's, I got to be honest, that's what sent me off the deep end. I get hundreds of these requests every day. I get people saying, hey, have this person on, talk about this nonsense or that nonsense. And I, most of them I go, that's not the kind of show I do. I don't really care why, 3 monkeys in a barrel, make people laugh. Somebody will do it, I'm sure. Good luck. But that one sentence is what really sent me completely off the deep end. That this guy's saying, I was a teacher, and just one day. What about the one day when the rat runs across the classroom floor? Do you care about that? What about the day in places like Detroit when it snows outside, you got to get a shovel to shovel the snow out of the classroom? What about that? I don't see any, I didn't get a press release for that. I didn't get a press release. I didn't hear a potential lawsuit from the Goldwater Institute over that. I hear of schools who are filled with mold. Where's the lawsuit over that? And again, when you come back down to it, it's not about the kids. Again, we're using the children as, the right wing does this masterfully, better than anyone, much like they do with the troops. Always a photo op, always put them out front, and oh, look how much we love them, while we're jabbing them in the back. This prop, this is an attack on the unions. This is an attack on the workers, because you know where this is going to go. They're going to attempt to sue the union. They're going to attempt to go and tie the union up in a bunch of litigation, which is really all these groups are meant to do. I had a friend of mine say, if you had any idea how much money labor unions spend on legal fees to defend themselves from frivolous lawsuits by, name the right-wing shill group and name the person who's trying to make a name for themselves to get out of doing the work that they do. It's just mind-blowing. And, I look at this statement. I keep coming back to this. He's concerned about the people, taking advanced placement tests. Going to get those advanced. Where were you with the concern where these schools don't have desks? They don't have chairs. My wife was just telling me of a story of one of her friends. Her daughter works in a school somewhere near Baltimore. They literally spent an entire day going through all of the desks and all of the chairs just to get 35 of them that had the little legs on the bottom so that the chair wouldn't rock back and forth. That chairs didn't have massive cracks in them so that when you sit in them, you get pinched. They spent all that time just to get for one classroom. And the conditions that you hear about in some of our rural and some of our urban areas where you have high poverty rates. And then to see this group going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars and going to cost not just unions, but also government millions of dollars in legal fees just because they have an ideology to push. They don't care about the kids in their advanced placement tests. They don't. And in those schools where kids can't even find a seat to sit in, advanced placement tests are the last thing on their mind. When these are kids who come to school hungry in the morning, advanced placement tests are the last thing on their mind. When they can't afford lunch and you have these sons that these people who take lunches from kids because they're a nickel short on their account. So many of these stories just send me into an absolute rage. And it should send all of us because we keep hearing it, and I truly, truly believe it. Children are the future of this country. Right now, we're educating the future of this democracy. We're educating the person who may save my life in 20 years. We're educating the person who may be taking care of me when I'm 70, 80 years old. And if we show them this kind of level of disrespect and then use them as a prop like this, it's maddening. Absolutely maddening. And then to talk about delayed graduation. I'll be honest with you. We can put that off a couple of days. If it means that we're going to get adequate funding into the schools so that kids do graduate. so that when they do graduate, that diploma means something. And when they do graduate, they have the ability to go on as far as their talents will take them. This kind of, and this is the thing that gets me. This kind of just absolute nonsense should be something we should be putting down in droves. Because what this was, and what this press release and all this really is it's a threat to our democracy. It's a threat to the will of we the people. This is a handful of people who have decided we're going to use our country's court system to thwart the will of the people. And we are now, unfortunately, coming to a moment in our history where we're going to see a lot more of these protests. If you've seen the pictures from Arizona, if you saw the sea of red as these Red for Ed teachers took to their capital to demand their legislators do something to restore education funding, not just in pay raises, but also in funding support staffs and in funding, hey, we should all have chairs and desks and books and computers and all the things that kids need. It's not just about greedy teachers. And I know that's how they want to frame it. But that's not the reality. So the final punchline, the threat. While students are suffering harm, these illegal actions expose school districts to legal liability. If schools don't resume educating students immediately, you know what's coming. In fact, the head of the Department of Litigation said in order to prevent the possibility of a lawsuit, it is necessary for district employees to return to work and for the district to operate as normal, including, if necessary, taking steps to find substitute teachers to replace those who refuse to comply with their legal and contractual obligations. So we're gonna fire all the teachers. Here we are, Ronald Reagan all over again. And the threat of taking more money and tying up more resources from the school is what they're pulling. Amazing stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are they right? Shouldn't. Is this that kind of issue? Or do you see it as I do? This is just another right-wing shill group trying to make their name and trying to cause government more trouble. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nation's headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. You have probably heard about the Red Scare, when thousands of people lost their jobs in the 1950s for allegedly harboring communist sympathies. But have you ever heard of the Lavender Scare that happened during those same years? Thousands of LGBT people lost their jobs due to discrimination. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1953. President Dwight David Eisenhower issued Executive Order 10450. The order declared that federal employees at all levels of government needed to be reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character, and of complete and unswerving loyalty to the United States. Later, the order listed reasons federal employees could be fired, including any criminal, infamous, dishonest, immoral, or notoriously disgraceful conduct, habitual use of intoxicants to excess, drug addiction, sexual perversion. That last item was widely understood as a euphemism for gay or lesbian activity. Major newspapers of the day often used the word perversion to to refer to homosexuality. The argument was made that homosexual people were a potential threat to national security because foreign agents could blackmail them for information by threatening to reveal their sexual preferences. More than 1,400 federal employees lost their jobs within the first 4 months after President Eisenhower signed the executive order. This anti-homosexual discrimination extended beyond the federal government. Industries that relied on government contracts took the order as a cue to conduct similar purges. In 1957, World War II veteran and astronomer Dr. Frank Kameny was fired from the Army Map Service for being gay. After his firing, Dr. Kameny dedicated his life to leading the fight to end LGBT discrimination. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
So this is one of those funny kind of bizarre things. Evidently, the son of the disgraced former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, evidently he doesn't see the big deal in Dad meeting with a Russian spy master. In fact, I guess how this played out is they went over for the big RT dinner that we've seen, the big award, and of course the cash payout. And then there was a meeting at this Russian spy master's house that evidently Junior doesn't see anything wrong with, and the fact that you didn't bother to mention it, nothing to see, no collusion here. Yeah, I got a bridge. I got a bridge. I'm going to share some of his thoughts on the big news, the Russian lawyer, all the other stuff. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come to talk with us. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, how you doing, Rick?
I am good. So what do you think of this? Junior saying, nothing to see here. Come on, Scott. No collusion. There's nothing here.
I needed a laugh. I needed a laugh this week. So I appreciate him providing the comedic entertainment that I was dying for. This is something that's been going on with desperate people for a while, and I think with Flynn Jr.'s called me fake news and all that, right before his father flipped on Trump and got indicted for the reasons that I filed the paperwork against him in the first place, that he called fake news. And he is also the guy that got fired from the Trump transition because of he started the Pizzagate rumor, which led to the shooting in D.C. So these guys are, for the most part, I would say that this is just like a mob, and Mike Flynn Jr. is part of that mob. Don Jr. is one of the bosses.
Yeah, this is most certainly the crime family. But here's the thing, and you brought it up. You've done this. You've already said this. It's already there. Today we find out that the Russian lawyer evidently was an informant for the Russians. Right. And we knew this. I mean, that's how it was originally reported. And then all of a sudden, no, she's not. She's just an independent citizen. And now here we are back to, yeah. Yeah,
we started with the. I found some court filings that involved a Kremlin-linked company that she represented, and then in her affidavit, buried within those court filings, it was clear that this was a Kremlin front company. So after we uncovered that part, then we submitted our documents through our attorneys, and then they give them to the appropriate party, investigators or whoever. With this, this was another example of when we uncovered more information and actually did not release it to the public because it had no benefit for the public eye. It wouldn't have led to us knowing about anything about this phone call or more about the meeting. It was just more court documents that provided the fact that she was linked to the Kremlin, and we made a lot of that public as well. And then it's just hard. Everybody skips over these You know, news is moving so fast that it's hard to get focus on one thing. So you kind of just have to pile on right when it comes back to it. And so it's nice for this to be reported widely. But this has happened, you know, in dozens of stories where sometimes it just takes a while for people to care.
That's a good point. I mean, you know, when we've talked about all of this stuff over the course of the last couple of years, and you know, you go, yeah, but we already know this. You know, because the thing that gets me is it changed. You know, you went through the whole hearing process, and oh no, she's just a private lawyer, and the media starts saying, oh, okay, she's just a private lawyer, and they go, well, now we know what we already knew.
Well, I can tell you that we did find a video that is reportedly her intimidating a person with the Russian mafia, acting as a member of the KGB or whatever you want to call them, FSB. I think that there's a lot of different things that are clear proof that she is, you know, up there on the hierarchy and close to Putin.
Yeah, she's more than what it appears. But here again, you know, it's also being reported that, you know, Michael Cohen was saying himself that he was part of the Russian mob. So, you know, you got to start asking these questions. If all roads lead you in that direction, we're going down that path. Is that not where they were? Yeah, I mean, it's hard because a lot of their stuff that they were doing was legal. And then you have the illegal parts where they try and claim, well, I was too incompetent for that. Now, these people are smart enough to get away with it for most of their lives. So they're smart enough to at least try and hide it. When you have an attorney who has 16 cell phones that turn up in Discovery that have old email accounts and photos and videos and whatever else on them, also rumored that not all the phones were his. As in, if the phones were clients of his, then who were his clients, and think about that. So, God forbid if one of those phones is Trump's phones. But that's the real potential here. But they already have, I'm sure they have all of Trump's phone records and, you know, any voicemails, emails, text messages, and they've been tracking all these people at a constant since they've been in office. So I would assume the worst is yet to come. We haven't seen anything yet. I mean, the reality is going to sink in. These people are criminals. They're going to go to prison. It's how many people are going to go to prison, and I'll stick with my number of 85. 85. All right. Yeah, I'll stick with that. And I'm sure we have a list of the 85 so that we could make this almost like you can make baseball cards out of this. I have a list of 347 people that should go to prison for this. See, now I think we should have trading cards of all of the characters in this, with little descriptions on the back. You know, kind of like like baseball stats. Only make it collusion stats. There's a bunch with nicknames that you just it's movie worthy. You can't write this. I mean, I when you come up with when I first started looking at this in August of 2016. You don't really understand what you're looking at when you get it, and the gravity of it and what the implications are of it. And then as you dig in more, you realize, wait a second, like these are videos of like Trump talking about building in Moscow the night after he stayed for Miss Universe, talking about how many meetings he had that day. And it just kind of proves the fact that the president's a liar. The president of the United States is a liar. And you realize the gravity of that. It really drives you to just keep on popping this stuff out. But I can tell you, and I'll say it time and time again, like nothing has hit yet. Nothing. Yeah, I keep going back to, you think about everything that we know, and then imagine all the stuff that we don't yet. Don't even, I tell people not to imagine what the worst is, but if you were to, that's where we're at. We are. If you could imagine a direct line between Trump and Putin through intermediaries, where it would be, through Amin Agalarov, who's the pop star, and Don Jr. and Kushner, where it's like that, and they're coordinating efforts in regards to the military, in regards to Syria, in regards to after the gas attack, in regards to after the attack in the UK. These are terrorist attacks, and these are terrorists behind it. These are tyrants. These are people that are evil. These people are murderers. You know what I mean? These are not nice people. And when we partner with them,
it becomes okay to become like them. And this is, again, it's not normal, and I'll keep on screaming, you know, forever about it, but this is not normal. But like I've said before, this is nothing. This is nothing. I just, from what I've learned this week, I am speechless.
Yeah, I'm with you. But, you know, the House Intel Committee came out with their report, and yeah, that's what it's worth. And the headline that I saw said, you know, the Russians, you know, meddled, but Trump didn't collude. He's just, you know, maybe if he's guilty of anything, it's just poor judgment, Scott. Just poor judgment. He didn't know. He didn't know.
Let me see here. Let me just look something up here. Collude definition: come to a secret understanding for a harmful purpose or to conspire. Did he do that? Absolutely. Yeah. Did he do that? Now, here's the fun part about it. He talks about collusion all the time, and I know this is his little trap. He'll be like, I didn't collude, and then I'm supposed to say, oh, well, you didn't collude. Well, I don't care if you colluded because that's not illegal in this circumstance. This is not what you'd be charged